Hello, and welcome to the third installment of the A Question of Reality Paint-Along. In this series, running through the month of September, we've been exploring and looking at the artwork A Question of Reality by Christopher Lovell. In our first video, we discussed just the basics of not only the artwork, but a little bit of background on Christopher Lovell and Neptune Project, the DJ duo that Christopher Lovell created this artwork for. In the second week, we met up with Rachel and Mr. Ray from Rachel Ray Craft to talk a little bit more about some of the specific details within the artwork and just kind of come up with our own theories or conclusions as to what it could mean or what story is being told. And in this video, the third video of the series, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about a couple particular pieces and just do a really quick story time, a very, very quick story time in regards to some of the imagery. So if we look at the artwork A Question of Reality, there are a couple of references to psychedelics. In our bottom left-hand corner, we have quite a few mushrooms growing there in the ground, or kind of in the jungle-ish looking area. And from there, we also move over kind of to the center of the image, and we see a square, and that square has a man or a person riding a bicycle with some other imagery on it. And you might be thinking, yeah, what is that? And that is actually a reference to the discovery of LSD. So, on April 19th, 1943, Albert Hofmann, who was a chemist from Switzerland, was experimenting with different derivatives of the ergot fungus. He's a chemist trying to just do some research exploration, and he ended up ingesting a very small amount of that compound that was derived from that fungus. And he decided in the reaction to this ingestion to ride his bike home, and he tells of his experience, essentially being one of the first person to have taken LSD and experienced the psychedelic response or whatever, hallucinations, that type of thing around that. And so he describes that story about riding home on his bike. So on April 19th every year, those that are celebratory of the discovery of LSD or are enthusiasts of LSD, they celebrate April 19th as Bicycle Day. So that piece of artwork that you see there is a call to that celebration of Bicycle Day, and it's often used on different flags or imagery for those that do celebrate that quote-unquote holiday. So that's what you see there, and oftentimes even the LSD itself, the drug itself, is often applied to small pieces of paper, and so people will print that square, that image, and then actually apply that chemical compound onto that. So not only is that art being used to represent the discovery of LSD, but oftentimes it's turned into the delivery method for the drug itself, which is kind of interesting and odd. So yeah, that called to me, and I did not know that that's what that imagery was until I looked it up after purchasing A Question of Reality, and I thought it was an interesting thing to incorporate into the this artwork. I thought it was very interesting. So that's just, a short little dive into not only that kind of the imagery of, magic mushrooms or whatever in the corner there, but also LSD as well. So, I have a personal story as it relates to one of these things that I want to share. Very short little story, but it immediately came to mind when I was thinking about not only these particular topics, but how they're intertwined with the artwork A Question of Reality as well. So we'll cut over to that, and that'll be it. Let's hear the story. Okay, bye. All right. So, I was in college. So this was 2005 or 6, when I did mushrooms for the first time. It was a really interesting experience, and I thought I'd share it here. Because I'm working on A Question of Reality, and there's some imagery of psychedelics and stuff within this kit, which I found to be interesting, and interesting that Diamond Art Club would be willing to produce this image given that stuff. I thought it was kind of cool. So I thought as part of this, and I probably already did a preamble for this in a little intro, but I thought as part of this series diving into this this piece of artwork, A Question of Reality, I could tell that story. It's a really short story. It's a really short story, but I just thinking back on that and then thinking about this image, I just found it really interesting. Some of the, oh no, I'm working on the kit right now and I just spilled some drills. But looking back at that time and then this image or this artwork here is like, oh, that's really interesting. So yeah, I was in college. And I was a very sheltered child growing up, and even into college years, just really hadn't ever been hadn't ever been exposed to any sort of things like, drugs, alcohol, any of that stuff, really until like my second year of college, to be quite honest. But it's something that I was curious about, and so I had a friend at the time who was like, "Oh, we're gonna go do that and go on a hike and XYZ, do the whole shebang, a little a little journey into your own mind. We want the whole thing, and so." I was like, okay, I guess this is happening. I want to do it. So we went up into the mountains, and not super far. We were in Horsetooth Reservoir, which is just outside of Fort Collins, Colorado. So we weren't like way up. We were still able to, in the evening, go back to his apartment that he had with some roommates and hang out and all that stuff. But there was a group of about, I think, 6 or 8 of us, and not everyone had done it. So we had a couple, couple people that just were there to come along, and I don't know. There was just a big group of us. So it was interesting. The main things that I remember from that experience that I thought kind of tied into this artwork were just kind of the look and feel of the look of everything, for me at least, kind of looking at the trees and the mountains and stuff, got this kind of like hazy orange hue to it, which I thought was really interesting because there's a lot of like hazy orange hues to some of the parts and pieces of A Question of Reality, towards the bottom where there are some mushrooms and stuff growing, all the way up the side where the white rabbit is, and even coming up into the sky and the galaxy. There's a lot of purples and oranges that are used in this artwork from like the DMCs that could have been like browns or other colors, but there's a slight wash of purple or fuchsia to this artwork here and there, that I find to be interesting because, I saw everything with like a wash of orange or fuchsia or purple in that moment, and so that was one thing. But the main thing for me was everything, when people talk about their experiences on like psychedelics or whatever, they talk about like, oh, you start to see patterns and you essentially hallucinate, I guess. But I was noticing a lot of Native American imagery in what I was seeing. So like, for instance, there was like this kind of clearing that had a bunch of like, not wheat, but just like grasses, like tall grasses. And I was like just staring at them, and I'd see like a Native American woman holding a child, or like somebody, like a man on the back of a horse with like a headdress on, or like just all these like stereotypical kind of Native American imagery. I was seeing that everywhere I was looking. Like in the mountainside, the mountain kind of like it took the shape of like a woman's face looking up into the sky and like that type of thing. So it was very like, I don't know, it was very much like calling back to nature and the original inhabitants of these areas in Colorado and all this wacky stuff. So, but again, with A Question of Reality, I see that a bit in the artwork itself, not necessarily Native American, but we have our Mayan temples and our hanging gardens and our pyramids and a lot of callbacks to the foundation of our kind of more modern society and the foundation of a lot of what modern society was eventually like built off of. And just kind of like ancient mysteries and that type of thing, and what are the meanings behind some of these places and people and meanings or purpose, So and when I saw this image and I saw the combination of not only the tab or the LSD imagery, but the mushroom imagery, I was like, oh, this might be an okay opportunity to talk about my experience. So yeah, I think it's cool that there's that interconnection between those illicit substances themselves and then how they might influence people's I guess ability to analyze these different theories and conspiracies and realities and all that stuff. And I don't know what Christopher Lovell is necessarily trying to say with the depictions of these things in this artwork alongside the themes of space travel, AI or robotics. I don't know what world peace, DNA, UFOs. I don't know where the reference of those substances or things play a factor into that, but I would assume in my head the way that it plays in is those things. Some people look to those things as a gateway to better understanding or broadening their horizons. Whether or not you agree with that or disagree, it's kind of part of that conversation in that way. So I just found it to be really interesting, and like I said, it reminded me of my own story of how I felt some sort of really deep and kind of inspiring connection to nature and to how the the people that were entrusted with this land, back, went way back in the day, and I was just in such awe and just very inspired by like, wow, like, there was communities and civilizations here long before I came strolling along in 2004, 2005, that had such a deep and meaningful connection with this land and with Colorado. And I don't know, it was just really very heady, very trippy, but it was at the time very awe-inspiring, and it's something I'll never forget, is seeing that in that moment and seeing those patterns and stuff, and just being like, oh my gosh, like, I need to have so much more respect for our open spaces, and so much more respect for the communities and cultures that were here long before I came traipsing around, So that's kind of what it did for me. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'll leave it at that. If you have a particular story that you feel comfortable sharing, please feel free, but do not feel obligated. But yeah, I just thought it was an interesting piece of A Question of Reality by Christopher Lovell to touch on. I wanted to tell that story and do just a slight dive into that man on a bicycle image itself and the meaning behind that. So I hope you enjoyed this little, mini series video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share this content with friends, family members. I hope you're enjoying this paint along, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.